You're listening to Let the Beat Build, a music production podcast where I, your host, Marcelino Villalpando, interviews music producers and have them walk us through their creative process. Today on the show, we have a producer by the name of Nim, and he's going to walk us through his track Flipped, which is off his project Lilac Chaser. We had a great conversation, but before we hop into it, let's take a listen to some of his music. Thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
And for those that don't know who you are, why don't you kind of give us your backstory, introduce yourself, kind of tell us about how you got into making music.
Sure. I'm Nim, NYM. Been producing for more than half my life now. Grew up in rural Virginia, Fredericksburg, Virginia, and grew up on a farm. We grew all kinds of vegetables. We had chickens and goats and sheep. Growing up there without television for many years, kind of cut off from a lot of the pop culture stuff in the early days of MTV and all that. I was just completely outside of all that stuff. In my early teens, subdivision came in, and some new neighborhood kids moved into this subdivision. They took up rapping and hip hop music, and around that time, I got my first computer, kind of a hand-me-down desktop, and just immediately became very interested in Microsoft Sound Recorder. And I mean, it was just this tiny little program, and you could record, you could reverse it. I think you could pitch it down and pitch it up. Eventually, I got a copy of a program called Acid Pro, which is an early kind of wave editing.
Yeah, that's really old school. I actually started.
Yeah.
My first programs were Adobe Audition, or it was actually Cool Edit Pro back then, Acid, and Fruity Loops.
Yeah.
Acid's a beast. Kind of underrated in my opinion.
Right.
So wait, let me get straight. So before those kids moved in, you never really had experience with hip hop music?
Not much. I mean, it was around that time that my sister gave me a mixtape for my birthday, and this mixtape was absolutely formative. Wu-Tang, Method Man, just Outkast, got Goody Mob, a lot of like Southern hip hop, and some classic hip hop, Tribe Called Quest, The Roots.
That's like a 10 Commandments mixtape, like people you need to listen to before proceeding with your life.
Yeah, right. And from there, it was just, SoulSeek and peer-to-peer software, just like finding every single hip hop artist. I became utterly obsessed. And before too long, I realized that what I loved most about hip hop were these beats, these instrumentals. Mm-hmm. And so again, with the peer-to-peer software, I would find the instrumentals of my favorite tracks. And I believe Black on Both Sides, there's a song with Mos Def and Busta Rhymes, and I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but the beat on that one, I found an instrumental, and I swear I played it until my nose bleeds. Like I would just loop it and loop it and loop it and just kind of immerse myself into that world. And this was just right before I got the beat making software, and I was trying to figure out how do they put these sounds together.
Yes.
These aren't traditional instruments I'm hearing. This is a collage of sounds, and
right.
I was trying to imagine the piece of equipment that someone would use to put this together, and then boom, computers.
Hearing your story reminds me so much of how I got into making beats early on myself. Like I remember after I heard 36 Chambers for the first time, like really, really heard it. Like my cousin gave it to me, and I was like, oh yeah, this song's cool. This Method Man song is cool, like whatever. But then like I listened to it for like three weeks straight, and I was like, how? Like this type of music, like this beat underneath, like how is this guy named the RZA able to make these sounds, like, and how come no one else is doing it? Like what instruments is he using to make these sounds? And then of course you do some research, you find out about sampling, And then that's just when the game just changes.
Yeah, the moment where I went from being a consumer to a producer in the literal sense.
Right.
Yeah, it was life changing.
Right. No, I mean, the very first time you open a music program, once you like realize the endless possibilities, you can't go back. You know, like that feeling, that initial feeling of opening up a program for the first time, nothing beats it, in my opinion.
Right.
Let's touch into the track Flipped. Let's dive into that now. How did that track come about?
Flipped started off from listening to some world music samples, you know. Just as I go, I find out there records I look for specific instruments, you know, soloed out instruments, and find something I like and start chopping it up and make my own patterns and melodies out of it. Flipped, I wanted to really get things choppy and kind of interrupted there. The plucked instrument came first, and originally it was a sample that I found that I then had my girlfriend record ukulele instead of the plucked instrument that I originally sampled, which was maybe a shamisen or another kind of like plucked Asian instrument.
Is it?
No, you're not on a G anymore.
It's put. Is that it?
Yeah, a little sharp. Try again. Yeah, that's good. And we found out that, of course, the song is too low for the range of the ukulele, so we had to pitch it to match her ukulele.
Was there something good in there already?
Yeah, I'd say so. It had a good kind of like choppy elegance to it. So that's how I came up with that tone there, and then pitched it back down. And so that's what I started with Flips, and it kind of exploded out from there. Some of the higher percussion that you hear in there, the stuff that's higher in the frequency range, that helps guide the drums. Kind of the alternating snare that you hear and the deep kick drum. I was definitely going for a kind of like stompy drum feel. Not quite boom bap, a little bit more contemporary than that. Something in your face, definitely hip hop inspired. I added that thick bass line. It had a little bit of the pitch bending that you hear in the final version originally as well, but the bass and the kick, they had a different relationship in the early versions. But I ended up simplifying it, just have that deep chest rumbling feeling that bends down and then climbs up at the end of the measure there. I had the sound and I was playing around with it, really expressive and fun to play on my MIDI controller. Didn't really have a good melody for it, and the one that you hear on that track actually was improvised by my singer as well, the same one who recorded the ukulele. She walked over and just started playing this simple melody. Not too aggressive, just kind of there in what I call the underbrush of the song. It's not the most prominent instrument, but it's there helping to guide the attitude. And that's kind of a nice countermeasure to the plucked harp sounds that you hear. That kind of descend as the song, as each measure kind of completes it. It starts high and goes low, which provides more of a somber attitude, while the synth is the kind of the answer to the harp's descent. I'm a big sucker for the plucked string instruments and the flute. That combo they're really fun to edit. As I usually do, start just trying to build a loop, build a cool loop out of the beat. And then I want the song to move around a little bit, have a little bit of a direction to it, so it can start telling the story. And generally, I'll work out some sort of chorus conception or hook for the songs. Even an instrumental song, I like there to be some sort of hook that we can kind of come back to. So after the synth, I brought in an early form of the vocals that started around 2 minutes and 10 seconds. I like to have them a little bit higher, but not chipmunk, you know what I mean? Just kind of setting more of a worldly vibe to it. They are nonsense. They're not a language. They are chopped up from sometimes multiple languages. This one kind of calls and answers itself. Layer that with the choral vocals, and you've got almost like a room full of people. The minute 137 is when that kind of choral part comes in, that kind of simulate the mellotron, atmosphere building, setting the stage there for the next part of the song. I knew that something was missing, some element to answer that plucked instrument. I decided to go for a flute to be the response to the call. Just found some nice, clean, open flute samples and started chopping that up and building a melody that answered the ukulele. Those are like the two MCs on the track. While there isn't some story of, the ukulele and the flute are fighting each other or trying to gain dominance over the track, I think something like that can kind of be invented in the mind of the listener. I want each song to be a journey and open for interpretation by the listener, while the atmosphere is very clear cut. I've had people listen to some of my songs and describe it as like, either a train driving through snow or riding a horse over a dusty desert, and there's something similar between those two very distinct spaces, but there's a commonality that links them. Even if someone's not really feeling the rest of the record because it's too ethereal and they want something punchier, Flipped is my attempt to kind of like capture their attention and make them say, ooh, like maybe there's something here deeper than the ethereal pretty stuff that you hear in the rest of the record.
That's a good point, because thinking about the project Lilac Chaser in its entirety, Flipped really stands out. It doesn't really go with the rest of the tracks, but then again it does. And it really moves the early half of the album along nicely, in my opinion.
Yeah, so the idea there was, I start with Light Catcher, which is kind of a beauty song. It's crystal clear and has a very kind of distinct ice-like feel to it, in my opinion. Eyeshine, track 2, is probably the most energetic and loud track on the album. Eyeshine starts to go into the dark a bit. It starts with the crackling fire sounds and has this very electronic kind of repeated chorus. And then Flipped, we're still in the dark, but we're starting to come out of the dark a bit. And from Flips to the next track, Sensory Fade, which is the most boom bap on the album, it's like we're emerging from a dark patch into kind of a more fun part of the album, So it's part of this evolution of a main character as they come out of this dark patch.
So while I was doing research for this episode, I had to look up what a Lilac Chaser was because I had never heard of it. And it's this crazy optical illusion. Listeners, I'll post it in the show notes. I highly recommend you check it out. But I'm just curious how you came up with this concept for the project in relation to the optical illusion. Do you mind elaborating on that for us?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So the Lilac Chaser illusion is a series of circles, lilac colored circles, and one of them disappears every second. And if you stare at the center, you start seeing the after image of a different color, like a green circle replacing the circle that disappears. Much easier just to look it up than describe it. But to me, optical illusions are an indication of how easily fooled we can be. They are beautiful, playful, but also deeply revealing about how easily tricked we can be. And that's extremely dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's fun, but it's also extremely dangerous. We have way too much faith in our abilities to detect bullshit. If anything, last couple of years are a strong indication. But I won't get into that too much. But
right,
that flipped represents the danger, playful element of illusions and sensory perception. It's also a reference to Convex, my previous album, because through a convex lens, images can be flipped, and it's a completely different way of looking at it. So I really liked the tie-in there with both optical illusion, sensory perception, and my previous album, which was a lot about taking a closer look at things, but also changing it by taking that closer look.
I love hearing that coming from your own words, because like thinking back on Flip now, that mistrust, that track is very cunning. It's very,
yes.
It has such a cool vibe to it. You're just moving around, you're dancing. It kind of makes you forget about everything else that's happening.
Yeah. It's the cunning villain, the villain with the grin. You don't really know whose side it's on, but it's got a sense of humor and a hidden blade.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me now, thinking about just like dance music in general. I just can't help but think about like old tribal times when people are just like in a trance to like some booming drums or whatever instruments you're playing around a campfire, where you're just like losing yourself.
Rapture.
Right.
Speaking of convex, a lot of my songs have sequels to them, and Flipped is a sequel to themes present in The Hidden Grasses, which is the last track on Convex. Another song that's dark, but eventually ends up in this kind of like almost trance-esque stomping bass drum, mm-hmm. and shimmery vibes, but with that kind of hidden darkness where you're not quite sure where you stand. So Flipped is an evolution of that character.
I love that. I love how all your music has just this undertone to it. It seems very well calculated. What other concepts are you trying to play with in the future? Like, where do you see your music going next?
I've got a couple. I've got one that I'm working on right now that is tentatively called Counter Magic, which is the idea of fighting mysticism with mysticism. It is an album about skepticism, arming yourself against some of these things that I introduced in Flipped. These ways that we can be deceived and deceive ourselves. How can we protect ourselves against that,
Right.
And for all of my concerts, I offer this thing, like anyone who comes to my concerts, I guarantee them immunity from any curses that have been aimed at them, any curses, any hexes. Unfortunately, I'm not able.
You're like a musical wizard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely a wizard. There's no question about that.
So, last question before I let you go. When all said and done, how would you like your music to be perceived?
How would I like it to be perceived? So I'm seeing a trend in today's music listening style where the album is less prevalent. This is the age of Discover Weekly and your Spotify mix, So I feel like, at least in my own listening style, I listen to fewer single artists and more of a playlist. So I want people to stop what they're doing and look at the computer and say, who is this? I want to move people deeply and uniquely with my music in some way that they did not expect or anticipate. Even for chill beats playlists, I want someone to stop and feel something and be transported in some way to their own imagination, shaped by the atmosphere that I put together. That is my dream. With each song being a space, a room, and a vibe that helps people kind of escape a little bit. A lot of people are listening to instrumental music to help them through the workday, or help them study or do something. And I want them to be able to go where they want to go. And if my music helps them do that in some way, I'm happy.
No, I love that. Like instrumental music, what I love about it, and essentially it's a blank template for people to kind of interpret for their own. But it's kind of like it's like musical art therapy in a way,
That's exactly right. That's how it is for me. And if other people are out there getting any of the happiness and therapeutic nature of music that I am, then that's just wonderful.
Thanks for coming to the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
You want to go ahead and tell everybody where we can find your music at?
Spotify, Google Play, my website, nimself.com. Got some cool pictures on Instagram if y'all want to check them out. I take a lot of pictures of bugs here in North Carolina. Next project hopefully out in the next year. I'm on about a 2-year schedule right now. Every 2 years I come out with something new.
And it's that time where I want to listen to Flipped in its entirety. So do you want to go ahead and introduce that for us?
Yeah, man. This is Flipped by Nim from the album Lilac Chaser 2016. Enjoy it.
want to thank Nim once again for coming on today's episode and giving us a glimpse of the man behind the music. I also want to thank you, the listener, for hanging out with us, because honestly, there's thousands of other podcasts you could have been listening to at this moment, but you decided to listen to ours, and that's dope. If you found value in today's episode, please feel free to share with a friend or give us a positive rating and comment on iTunes, because that helps other people find the show. Let the Beat Book can be found wherever podcasts can be found, including Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Marcelino Villalpando, and this is Let the Beat Build. Until next time, peace.